Hashtag the hook in the vast expanse of the galaxy, where a million civilizations rise and fall like waves against cosmic shores, there exists a single moment that changed everything. A moment when the most advanced species in known space, beings who had conquered black holes, who bent reality to their will, who considered themselves the apex of evolution, looked up at their sensors and felt something they hadn't experienced in 10,000 years. Fear. It wasn't the ship's size that broke them, though it dwarfed their greatest dreadnoughts like a mountain overshadows a pebble. It wasn't the technology, though their most brilliant minds couldn't comprehend how the vessel even existed without tearing apart spacetime itself. It wasn't even the weapons, though a single one of its cannons could sterilize entire star systems. No, what truly shattered their understanding of the universe was the realization of what humanity had built this ship to fight. Because when you see a predator's teeth, you don't fear the teeth, you fear what made those teeth necessary. This is the story of the day the galaxy learned that humanity wasn't the prey they thought we were. This is the story of what happened when they discovered what we were really afraid of. And this is the story of why, even now, centuries later, no alien species sleeps peacefully knowing that somewhere in the dark between stars, the Titan-class ship Harbinger of Dawn still patrols the void, its human crew watching for threats that make their worst nightmares seem like children's tales. The galaxy thought they knew humanity. They were wrong. They thought they understood warfare. They were wrong about that too. But, most importantly, they thought they were safe at the top of the cosmic food chain. They had never been more wrong about anything in their entire existence. Admiral Zexthera of the Hegemony's Third Fleet had seen many things in her 4 centuries of service. She had witnessed the birth of stars, the collapse of civilizations, and the rise of species that defied the natural order. Her crystalline form, evolved from the silicon-based life of Kepler 442b, had grown tall and elegant through decades of commanding respect across the galaxy. The Hegemony was the undisputed master of this spiral arm, their technology so advanced that they had long ago stopped considering other species as anything more than curiosities. That confidence died the moment her sensor operator's voice cracked across the bridge. "Admiral, we have an anomaly at the edge of the system. It's impossible." Zexthera's optical clusters focused on the main display, her internal processing cores immediately analyzing the data streaming from their most advanced sensors. What she saw made her question everything she thought she knew about physics, engineering, and the fundamental laws that governed reality itself. The ship was enormous. Not just large, enormous in a way that challenged comprehension. Their measurements indicated a vessel nearly 50 kilometers in length, its mass readings fluctuating between impossible and catastrophic. The hull appeared to be constructed from materials that shouldn't exist, metals that bent light around them while simultaneously radiating energy signatures that made their instruments screen warnings. "Run a full-spectrum analysis," Zexthera ordered, her voice maintaining its usual calm despite the chaos erupting in her thoughts. "Cross-reference with all known vessel classifications from every species in the database." The tactical officer, a 4-armed Cathari whose species had mastered warfare before most others had discovered fire, worked frantically at his station. "Admiral, the computer is rejecting the data. It's classifying the readings as sensor malfunction. Override the safety protocols. I want raw data." The numbers that appeared on the screen made the bridge fall silent. The ship's power output exceeded that of most stars. Its gravitational distortion was so severe that spacetime was visibly warping around it, creating lensing effects that made the stars behind it dance and shimmer. Most terrifying of all, the vessel was accelerating at speeds that should have turned any crew inside into subatomic particles, yet it maintained perfect structural integrity. "What species could build such a thing?" whispered the communications officer, a telepathic Vendari whose mental abilities allowed her to process information faster than most computers. Zexthera was about to respond when the ship changed course. Not gradually, as any rational vessel would when adjusting trajectory, but instantaneously. One moment it was heading toward the outer planets, the next it had altered its vector by 90 degrees without any visible deceleration. The maneuver should have been impossible, the kinetic forces involved should have shattered the ship like glass. Instead, it continued on its new heading as if the laws of physics were merely suggestions. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission. Audio only, but the signal is unlike anything in our databases." The voice that emerged from the speakers was organic, distinctly biological, yet carried an undertone of steel that made every being on the bridge instinctively step back. It spoke in Galactic Standard, but, with an accent none of them recognized. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force vessel Harbinger of Dawn. We are conducting a patrol sweep of this system. Please maintain current heading and do not interfere with our operations." Earth. The name triggered immediate searches through the hegemony's vast databases. What they found should have been reassuring: a small planet in an unremarkable star system, home to a species that had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. According to their records, humans were newcomers to the galactic stage, barely worth notice except as potential subjects for study or perhaps eventual integration into the hegemony's sphere of influence. Yet here was a human ship that dwarfed anything the hegemony had ever constructed. "Transmit our standard response protocol," Zexthara ordered. "Inform them that this system falls under hegemony protection and request clarification of their mission parameters." The response came immediately, without the typical delays of faster-than-light communication. "Admiral Zexthara, your presence has been noted. We appreciate your concern for system security, but this matter falls under Earth Defense Force jurisdiction. We strongly recommend you maintain safe distance." The fact that they knew her name sent chills through the bridge crew. The hegemony's finest intelligence networks couldn't penetrate their own security, yet this human ship had somehow identified not just their vessel, but their commanding officer. "How do they know who I am?" Zexthara asked her intelligence officer. "Unknown, Admiral. Our communications are encrypted with quantum-entangled keys that change every nanosecond. There should be no way for them to access our ship's records." The human captain's voice returned, now carrying what sounded almost like amusement. "Admiral, your tactical officer is currently running battle simulations against our vessel. I should point out that this is inadvisable for several reasons, not least of which is that your computers are incapable of accurately modeling our defensive capabilities." Zexthara's optical clusters swiveled toward her tactical station, where the Kethari officer had indeed been running combat scenarios. His forearms had frozen over his controls, his predatory features showing an expression of pure confusion. "Admiral, I haven't initiated any external scans. Everything I'm doing is internal to our computer systems. There's no way they should be able to detect." His words were cut off as every screen on the bridge displayed the same image, a detailed schematic of their ship, complete with crew locations, weapon specifications, and tactical assessments. The level of detail was impossible. It showed not just their current configuration, but modifications that had been made in the past month, crew rotations from the previous week, and even the contents of their secure armories. "This is a demonstration of our scanning capabilities," Captain Chen's voice continued, now devoid of any warmth. "We are not here to threaten you or your crew, Admiral, but we need you to understand the reality of the situation. Your vessel, impressive as it may be by hegemony standards, is approximately equivalent to what we would classify as a patrol boat. The technology gap between our civilizations is significant." Zexthara felt her crystalline structure resonate with frequencies she hadn't experienced since her youth: fear, confusion, and something approaching awe. The hegemony had spent millennia establishing their technological supremacy. They had absorbed dozens of species, each contributing their unique innovations to an ever-growing technological base. Their ships incorporated the best defensive systems from the Krell Empire, the most advanced weapons from the Saurian Collective, and energy generation techniques that had taken the ancestral machines 10,000 years to perfect. Yet this single human vessel was treating them like children playing with toys. "Captain Chen," Zexthara said carefully, "perhaps we could arrange a more formal meeting. The Hegemony Council would be very interested in establishing diplomatic relations with your people." The pause that followed lasted exactly long enough for Zexthara to wonder if she had somehow offended the human captain. When the response came, it carried undertones that made her wonder if she had misunderstood something fundamental about this entire encounter. "Admiral, I appreciate the offer, but I don't think you understand what we're dealing with here. The Earth Defense Force doesn't exist to make friends or establish trade relationships. We exist because there are things in this galaxy that would consume everything you've ever known without hesitation or remorse. Your hegemony, with all its power and technology, would be nothing more than an appetizer to the entities we're designed to fight." The bridge fell completely silent. In all their centuries of exploration and conquest, the hegemony had encountered threats, certainly. Hostile species, dangerous phenomena, even ancient automated weapons left behind by long-dead civilizations. But they had always been able to overcome these challenges through superior technology, tactical brilliance, or simple overwhelming force. The idea that there might be threats so severe that they required weapons like the Harbinger of Dawn was almost incomprehensible. What kind of entities? Zexthera asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. The kind that make us build ships like this one, Captain Chen replied. The kind that turned the Andromeda Galaxy into a lifeless void 3 million years ago. The kind that our long-range sensors have detected moving toward the local group. The implications hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. Every species in the galaxy knew about the Andromeda Galaxy's silence, the complete absence of any intelligence signals from what should have been a thriving galactic civilization. The scientific consensus had always been that it was a natural phenomenon, perhaps the result of a gamma-ray burst or some other cosmic catastrophe. The possibility that it had been deliberately destroyed by hostile entities was a nightmare that none of them had ever seriously considered. How long do we have? Zexthera found herself asking. Uncertain. Our best estimates suggest anywhere from 50 to 500 years, depending on their method of travel and whether they decide to consume everything in their path or simply establish beachheads for a larger invasion force. The tactical officer spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper. Admiral, if what they're saying is true, then every military force in the galaxy combined wouldn't be sufficient to. You're correct, Captain Chen interrupted. Which is why humanity began the Titan-class construction program. We're not just building ships, Admiral. We're building the tools necessary to fight a war that could determine whether intelligent life continues to exist in this universe. Zexthera stared at the image of the human ship on her screen, her understanding of the galaxy shifting in ways that made her feel as if she were experiencing existence for the first time. The hegemony's greatest dreadnoughts, ships that could crack planets and level civilizations, were suddenly revealed as toys in comparison to the threats that humanity was preparing to face. Why are you telling us this? She asked. Because we're going to need allies, Admiral. And because when the time comes, you're going to need to decide whether you want to stand with us or pretend that the threat doesn't exist until it's too late. The Harbinger of Dawn began moving again, its impossible bulk shifting through space with the grace of a dancer and the inevitability of a natural disaster. As it passed their position, the hegemony ship's sensors detected weapon signatures that made their most advanced military computers shut down rather than attempt to calculate the destructive potential. One more thing, Admiral, Captain Chen's voice came through the speakers one final time. This conversation is being recorded by every intelligence service in the galaxy. They'll want to know what we discussed. When they ask you about humanity's capabilities, I suggest you be honest. The survival of every species in this galaxy may depend on how seriously they take the threat we're all facing. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in a silence so complete that the only sound was the gentle hum of their ship's life support systems. Zexthera watched the human vessel disappear into the distance, its impossible speed carrying it beyond their sensor range in minutes. In her 4 centuries of service, she had never felt so small, so unprepared, or so terrified of what the future might hold. The hegemony had ruled this region of space for millennia, confident in their supremacy and secure in their power. That confidence had just evaporated like mist before the dawn. As she stared at the empty space where the Harbinger of Dawn had been, Admiral Zexthera began to understand that everything had changed. The galaxy was no longer the place she had known, ruled by familiar powers and governed by predictable rules. Now it was a battlefield, and humanity had just shown them what real warriors looked like. The only question remaining was whether the rest of the galaxy would be wise enough to listen, or foolish enough to ignore the warning they had just received. Time, as Captain Chen had made clear, was not on their side. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened exactly 72 hours after Admiral Zexthera's encounter with the Harbinger of Dawn. Representatives from 47 major civilizations had gathered on the neutral station of Nexus Prime, their various forms of transportation creating a traffic pattern around the massive structure that resembled a swarm of insects around a glowing flower. High Chancellor Mordak of the Zenthari Dominion called the session to order with the ritualistic chiming of crystalline bells that resonated through the council chamber's atmospheric processors. His insectoid features, evolved over millions of years to express subtle emotional nuances through antenna positioning and wing coloration, showed signs of stress that hadn't been seen since the last Great Plague had swept through the Outer Rim territories. Fellow representatives, Mordak began, his voice carrying the harmonic undertones that made Zenthri's speech so distinctive. We have received disturbing reports from the hegemony regarding an encounter with a vessel of unknown origin. Admiral Zexthera has requested permission to address this assembly directly. The holographic projector in the center of the chamber activated, displaying the Admiral's crystalline form in perfect detail. Even through the transmission, the assembled representatives could sense the fundamental change in her bearing. The confident, almost arrogant posture that had characterized hegemony officials for centuries had been replaced by something that looked uncomfortably like humility. Honored delegates, Zexthera began, what I am about to tell you will challenge everything we believe about our place in the galaxy. 3 days ago, my fleet encountered a single vessel that has forced me to reconsider our understanding of technology, warfare, and the threats we face as a galactic community. She activated her own projection system, displaying the sensor readings from her encounter with the Harbinger of Dawn. The assembled representatives studied the data with the kind of intense focus usually reserved for trade negotiations or territorial disputes. Speaker Veltar of the Aquatic Collective was the first to voice what many were thinking. Her voice bubbled through the translation matrix, carrying the liquid consonants of her underwater civilization. These readings must be in error. No single vessel could generate this much power without creating a gravitational singularity. That was my initial assessment as well, Zexthera replied. However, our instruments were functioning perfectly, and the encounter was witnessed by my entire crew. The vessel exists, and its capabilities exceed anything in our collective technological database. Ambassador Kretach of the Saurian Collective leaned forward on his massive haunches, his reptilian features showing the kind of predatory interest that had made his species the galaxy's premier military contractors. You said it was human in origin. According to our records, Earth's technology is primitive at best. They've had faster-than-light travel for less than a century. That is what makes this situation so concerning, Zexthera said. Either our intelligence regarding human capabilities is completely inadequate, or humanity has achieved a technological breakthrough that defies our understanding of scientific progression. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of voices as representatives from dozens of species began speaking simultaneously. The translation system struggled to keep up with the overlapping conversations, creating a garbled mess of conflicting opinions and increasingly agitated demands for clarification. High Chancellor Mordak's bells chimed again, their harmonic frequency designed to cut through chaos and restore order. We will hear from each representative in turn. Ambassador Kretach, you have the floor. The massive Saurian rose to his full height, his scaled height reflecting the chamber's lights and patterns that indicated deep concern. My people have been monitoring human military development since their first contact with the galactic community. They possess crude nuclear weapons, kinetic projectiles, and basic energy manipulation technology. Nothing in our observations suggests they could construct a vessel of this magnitude. Unless they've been hiding their true capabilities, suggested Representative Yxnara of the Synthetic Consciousness Collective, her artificial form shifting between different metallic configurations as she processed multiple data streams simultaneously. My people have attempted to penetrate human communication networks on several occasions. The level of encryption and counterintelligence they employ is surprisingly sophisticated. This admission caused another stir among the assembled delegates. The Synthetic Consciousness Collective was renowned for their ability to infiltrate and analyze digital systems. The idea that a supposedly primitive human civilization could resist their intrusion attempts was unsettling. Speaker Veltar activated her own display, showing oceanographic data from her homeworld. My civilization has been monitoring gravitational anomalies throughout the galaxy for the past millennium. We detected massive disturbances in what you call human space approximately 50 years ago. At the time, we attributed them to natural phenomena, colliding neutron stars or black hole interactions. Zexthera's optical clusters focused on the data. The timing corresponds with our earliest records of human space exploration. If they were conducting large-scale construction projects, then they've been planning this for decades, finished Ambassador Thex of the silicon-based hegemony, his geometric form rearranging itself into patterns that expressed profound unease. But, planning for what? What could possibly require such massive expenditures of resources and technology? The chamber fell silent as Zexthera prepared to share the most disturbing part of her encounter. According to Captain Chen of the Harbinger of Dawn, humanity is preparing for a threat that destroyed the entire Andromeda galaxy. They claim that hostile entities are moving toward our local group and that humanity's Titan-class ships are designed to fight them. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the chamber's atmospheric systems seemed to quiet, as if the station itself was holding its breath. High Chancellor Mordak was the first to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. The Andromeda galaxy has been silent for over 3 million years. Our scientists have always attributed this to natural causes. What if they were wrong? Asked Representative Korthak of the Crystalline Matriarchy, her faceted form refracting light into prismatic patterns that expressed deep philosophical concern. What if the silence isn't natural at all? Dr. Halvex, the chief xenobiologist for the Galactic Research Consortium, activated his holographic display to show astronomical data collected over millennia. We've detected artificial signals from Andromeda dating back approximately 3.2 million years. They ceased abruptly, with no gradual decline that would suggest natural extinction events or technological stagnation. The implications were staggering. If an entire galaxy had been systematically silenced by hostile forces, then every civilization in the local group was potentially facing an existential threat that made their usual concerns about territory, resources, and political influence seem laughably trivial. Ambassador Kretach's predatory features showed an expression that his species reserved for facing worthy opponents. If humans know about this threat, why haven't they shared this information with the galactic community? Perhaps they tried, suggested Zexthera. When was the last time any of us took human diplomatic overtures seriously? They've been requesting full membership in the Galactic Council for 40 years. We've consistently relegated them to observer status because we considered them technologically inferior. The uncomfortable truth of this statement rippled through the assembly. Humanity's requests for inclusion in galactic governance had been routinely dismissed, their representatives treated as curiosities rather than equals. The assumption had always been that they would eventually achieve the technological sophistication necessary for full participation, but that such development was still centuries away. Representative Yxnara's form shifted into a configuration that indicated intensive processing. I have been analyzing the data Admiral Zexthera provided. If the power readings are accurate, humanity's Titan-class vessels represent a technological achievement that surpasses our combined civilizations by several orders of magnitude. That's impossible, stated Secretary Valamoth of the Trade Federation, his tentacled form writhing with agitation. No single species could achieve such advancement without external assistance or access to ancient technologies. Unless they encountered something that forced rapid advancement, suggested Dr. Halvex. Species facing existential threats often experience accelerated technological development. If humanity detected the approaching threat decades ago, they would have been forced to innovate at unprecedented rates. Speaker Veltar's aquatic form rippled with patterns that indicated deep concern. My people's astronomical observations have detected minor gravitational anomalies at the edge of the galaxy. We attributed them to passing dark matter concentrations, but if they represent approaching vessels. She activated another display, showing gravitational sensor data that painted a chilling picture. Subtle distortions in spacetime were indeed detectable at the very limits of their most sensitive instruments, moving in patterns that suggested massive objects traveling at relativistic speeds. The chamber fell into another profound silence as the assembled representatives contemplated the possibility that an invasion force capable of destroying entire galaxies was already approaching their position. High Chancellor Mordak's bells chimed with frequencies that expressed emergency protocols. If this threat is real, then our previous assumptions about galactic security are completely inadequate. We need to establish immediate contact with human leadership. I've already attempted to do so, Zexthera admitted. Human diplomatic channels claim that decisions regarding their Titan-class program are made by something called the Earth Defense Force, which operates independently of their civilian government. They've agreed to send a representative, but they've made it clear that they consider this a military matter rather than a diplomatic one.
Ambassador Kretach's predatory instincts were clearly engaged as he processed this information.
Military decision-making suggests they view the threat as immediate rather than hypothetical. Civilian governments plan for centuries ahead, military organizations plan for conflicts that could begin tomorrow. The implications were becoming clearer and more terrifying with each revelation. If humanity was treating the approaching threat as an immediate military concern, then the timeline for galactic defense was much shorter than anyone had imagined. Representative Korthak's crystalline form arranged itself into patterns that indicated a profound philosophical question.
What if we've been thinking about this completely wrong? What if humanity isn't just another emerging species struggling to find its place in the galaxy? What if they're refugees from a previous galactic catastrophe who have been preparing for the threat to follow them?
This possibility had never occurred to any of them, but it explained numerous anomalies in human behavior and development. Their rapid technological advancement, their focus on military technologies, their reluctance to fully integrate with galactic civilization, all of these could be explained if humanity was a survivor species that had encountered these threats before. Dr. Halvax activated another display, showing genetic analysis of human specimens collected over the years. Human DNA contains markers that suggest significant genetic bottlenecking in their relatively recent past. We attributed this to natural evolutionary pressures, but if their population was drastically reduced by contact with extragalactic threats, the pieces were falling into place, creating a picture that was both terrifying and inspiring. Humanity might not be a young species stumbling toward technological sophistication, they might be veterans of a galactic war that had already consumed multiple civilizations. High Chancellor Mordak's chimes carried undertones of resolution mixed with fear.
We need to hear what humanity's representative has to say.
If they're truly preparing for a threat of this magnitude, then our survival may depend on understanding their perspective. Speaker Veltar's form rippled with agreement. And we need to begin our own preparations. If humanity is building ships like the Harbinger of Dawn, then we need to understand what kind of enemy requires such extreme measures. The emergency session continued for another 6 hours, but the fundamental questions had been established. The galaxy's major civilizations were facing a threat that made their usual concerns irrelevant, and their survival might depend on the technological and strategic innovations of a species they had previously dismissed as insignificant. As the representatives prepared to adjourn, each carrying orders to begin immediate assessments of their defensive capabilities, a final thought occurred to many of them simultaneously.
If humanity was building weapons capable of fighting galaxy-destroying entities, what did that say about humanity itself?
The answer to that question, they were beginning to realize, might be more important than the threat they were all preparing to face. For if the threats approaching from Andromeda were predators capable of consuming entire galaxies, then humanity's response suggested they were predators of an entirely different kind. And the galaxy was about to discover which type of predator was more dangerous. General Marcus Webb stood at the edge of the observation deck aboard Nexus Prime, watching the diverse fleet of alien vessels that had gathered in response to the Galactic Council's emergency session. His weathered face, marked by decades of command decisions and the weight of secrets that could crush civilizations, showed no emotion as he studied the ships that represented the galaxy's most advanced military technologies. Each vessel was a masterpiece of engineering, incorporating millions of years of evolutionary advancement and technological innovation. The Hegemony's crystalline dreadnoughts bent light around their hulls, creating optical illusions that made targeting nearly impossible. The Saurian Collective's biomechanical warships pulsed with organic energy, their living hulls capable of regenerating damage faster than most weapons could inflict it. The synthetic consciousness ships were geometric impossibilities, their fractal designs optimized for computational warfare that could rewrite reality at the quantum level. Any one of these vessels could have conquered Earth's solar system during humanity's first tentative steps into space. Now, they were nothing more than escorts for the small human transport that had brought Webb to this meeting. Behind him, the conference chamber was filling with representatives who believed they were about to receive critical intelligence about an approaching threat. Webb knew better. They were about to learn that their understanding of the universe was so fundamentally flawed that their entire civilization would need to be rebuilt from the ground up, if they survived long enough to attempt it. His aide, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Reeves, approached with the confidence of someone who had served alongside him through humanity's darkest hours. "Sir,
the delegates are ready for your presentation. Should I activate the security protocols? Full isolation, Webb confirmed.
No external communications, no data recording, no quantum entanglement with outside systems.
What we're about to discuss cannot leave this room until we decide how to handle the aftermath. The chamber fell silent as Webb entered, his simple Earth Defense Force uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial garments worn by the alien representatives. He carried himself with the bearing of a soldier who had seen too much but refused to break under the weight of knowledge that could destroy minds. High Chancellor Mordak's bells chimed in greeting, their harmonic frequencies expressing formal respect mixed with nervous anticipation. General Webb, the Galactic Council appreciates your willingness to address our concerns regarding humanity's military preparations. Webb activated his own holographic display, showing star charts that covered not just the local group, but vast regions of space extending far beyond the known galaxy. Chancellor, what I'm about to tell you will require you to expand your understanding of the universe by several orders of magnitude. The threat you're concerned about isn't coming from the Andromeda Galaxy. It's already here. The statement hit the assembly like a physical blow. Representatives who had spent days preparing for discussions about distant threats suddenly found themselves facing the possibility of immediate invasion. Ambassador Kretach leaned forward, his predatory instincts fully engaged. Explain. Webb's display zoomed in on regions of space that appeared empty to conventional sensors. 3 million years ago, the entities you're worried about didn't just destroy the Andromeda Galaxy. They consumed it. Every star, every planet, every trace of matter was converted into something else, something that exists in dimensions our physics can barely detect. He manipulated the display to show energy readings that made the assembled representatives' instruments scream warnings. What appears to be empty space between galaxies is actually filled with converted matter existing in parallel dimensions. The entities can access our reality at will, but they prefer to observe their targets before beginning active consumption. Representative YX Nara's synthetic form shifted into configurations designed for processing incomprehensible data. You're suggesting that the space between galaxies is occupied by hostile intelligences that can manipulate dimensional barriers?
I'm not suggesting it, Webb replied grimly.
I'm telling you it's documented fact.
Humanity has been monitoring their activities for over a century. The chamber erupted in chaos as representatives demanded to know how humanity could possess such information while the galaxy's most advanced civilizations remained ignorant. Webb waited for the noise to subside before continuing. 147 years ago, human deep space exploration vessels detected gravitational anomalies that shouldn't exist according to conventional physics. Our scientists initially attributed them to unknown stellar phenomena, but further investigation revealed artificial patterns suggesting massive construction projects in regions we thought were empty.
Dr. Halvex activated his own analysis systems, cross-referencing Webb's data with the Galactic Scientific Database.
These energy signatures don't match any known natural phenomena, but they also don't correspond to any technology in our historical records.
That's because the entities operating in those regions aren't using technology as we understand it, Webb explained. They've transcended the limitations of three-dimensional existence.
What we interpret as construction projects are actually the entities reshaping reality itself to create staging areas for galactic consumption.
Speaker Veltar's aquatic form rippled with patterns indicating profound distress.
You're describing capabilities that violate fundamental physical laws.
No intelligence, regardless of advancement, could manipulate dimensional barriers on that scale. Webb's expression grew even grimmer.
You're thinking like a civilization that evolved naturally within normal spacetime. These entities didn't evolve, they were created by a previous galactic civilization as weapons of absolute destruction. They've been consuming galaxies for millions of years, growing stronger with each conquest.
The implications were staggering.
The assembled representatives were facing not just an invasion, but the deliberate action of entities designed to be unstoppable by any natural force. High Chancellor Mordak's bells chimed with frequencies that expressed existential terror.
If these entities are as powerful as you suggest, how has humanity survived their attention? Because we haven't, Webb said quietly. Humanity didn't evolve on Earth.
We're refugees from the Perseus Arm, fleeing the consumption of our original homeworld.
The silence that followed was absolute. Every assumption the galactic community had made about humanity's origins and development was suddenly revealed as catastrophically wrong. Representative Korthak's crystalline form arranged itself into patterns that indicated complete cognitive restructuring. You're saying that humanity has already encountered these entities and survived? Barely, Webb admitted. Our original civilization was far more advanced than our current one.
We had technology that could manipulate spacetime, weapons that could destroy star systems, defensive systems that could hide entire planets from detection.
None of it mattered when the entities arrived.
He activated another display, showing recordings that had been preserved from humanity's original homeworld. The images were almost incomprehensible, vast mechanical structures that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that human eyes couldn't properly process, consuming everything they touched and converting it into more of themselves. The entities don't just destroy civilizations, Webb continued.
They analyze them, learn from them, and incorporate their knowledge into their own capabilities.
Every species they consume makes them more intelligent, more adaptable, and more dangerous.
Ambassador Kretach's military training was struggling to process warfare on such a scale. How did you escape?
By sacrificing everything else, Webb said, his voice carrying the weight of ancestral guilt. Our greatest scientists developed a probability manipulation device that could alter the fundamental nature of cause and effect on a localized scale. We used it to erase our civilization from the entity's perception, making it appear that our homeworld had never existed. The technology he was describing was so advanced that it challenged the assembled representatives' understanding of what was physically possible.
Dr. Halvex leaned forward, his scientific curiosity overriding his fear. But the energy requirements for such a device would be astronomical.
It would require the total conversion of several stellar masses.
We use 13 star systems, Webb confirmed.
13 entire solar systems, each containing billions of sentient beings, were converted into pure energy to power a single defensive operation. It wasn't enough to destroy the entities, only to hide from them temporarily.
The moral implications were staggering.
Humanity's survival had come at the cost of genocide on an unimaginable scale, the sacrifice of entire civilizations to preserve a small remnant population. Speaker Veltar's form rippled with patterns that indicated profound horror.
And the survivors?
2 million humans in suspended animation aboard 17 colony ships, sent to random coordinates in empty space. Most of the ships were never heard from again. Ours found Earth and began the process of rebuilding our civilization from primitive levels. The pieces of humanity's apparently rapid technological development were falling into place. They hadn't achieved their advancement through normal scientific progression, they had been recovering memories and technologies from a far more advanced ancestor civilization.
Representative YX-Nara's processing capabilities were working at maximum efficiency. Your Titan-class ships aren't new developments. They're reconstructions of weapons you used in your previous war. Improved reconstructions, Webb corrected.
We've had over 1,000 years to analyze our failures and develop better strategies. The Harbinger of Dawn represents technology that's significantly more advanced than what our original civilization possessed.
This revelation sent shockwaves through the assembly.
If humanity's current technology exceeded their original advanced civilization, then they had been undergoing technological development at rates that defied every known model of scientific progress.
High Chancellor Mordak's bells chimed with frequencies that expressed desperate hope. If your weapons are more advanced now, does that mean you can defeat these entities?
Webb's pause was long enough to extinguish that hope.
Unknown.
Our projections suggest that we might be able to inflict significant damage, possibly even destroy individual entity clusters. But there are thousands of them scattered throughout the intergalactic medium, and they learn from every encounter. He activated a final display, showing gravitational sensor data from the outer edges of the galaxy. They've been observing this galaxy for approximately 50,000 years, mapping every civilization, cataloging every technology, and preparing for systematic consumption.
The process typically begins within the next century. Ambassador Kretach's predatory features showed the kind of grim determination that had made his species the galaxy's premier military contractors. What do you need from us?
Everything, Webb replied without hesitation. Every ship, every weapon, every scientific innovation that every species in this galaxy has ever developed.
This isn't a war that any single civilization can win.
It's going to require the combined resources and knowledge of every intelligent species working in perfect coordination. The magnitude of the cooperation he was describing had never been attempted in galactic history. Species that had been enemies for millennia would need to share their most closely guarded military secrets and coordinate their efforts against a threat that none of them fully understood. Representative Korthak's crystalline form shifted into patterns that indicated complex philosophical calculations. You're asking us to abandon millions of years of independent development and trust our survival to a species that most of us knew nothing about until recently.
I'm asking you to face reality, Webb replied. The entities are coming whether we cooperate or not.
The only question is whether we face them as a unified force or as separate civilizations that will be consumed one by one. Speaker Veltar activated her own astronomical displays, cross-referencing Webb's data with her people's long-term gravitational observations. General, our sensor data indicates that whatever is approaching will reach the outer edges of our galaxy within 50 to 75 years.
How long do we have to prepare? Optimistically?
50 years, Webb said.
Realistically? They could begin active operations at any time.
The entities prefer to destabilize their targets through proxy conflicts before beginning direct consumption. Every war we fight among ourselves, every resource we waste on internal conflicts, makes their job easier.
The implications were clear.
Galactic civilization would need to transform itself completely, abandoning traditional patterns of competition and conflict in favor of unprecedented cooperation and unity. High Chancellor Mordak's bells chimed with the harmonic frequencies reserved for the most solemn occasions. General Webb, what you're describing isn't just military preparation.
It's the complete reorganization of galactic society. Chancellor, what I'm describing is survival, Webb replied. Everything else is optional.
As the session concluded, each representative carried with them the knowledge that their universe was far more dangerous than they had ever imagined, and that their survival depended on trusting a species that had already survived the unthinkable once before. The question remaining was whether the rest of the galaxy possessed the courage to face the truth and the wisdom to act on it before it was too late. The entities were coming, and time was running out. 23 years after General Webb's revelation to the Galactic Council, the Kepler shipyards had become the largest construction project in galactic history. Stretching across 7 star systems, the facility consumed the output of entire stellar mining operations and employed the combined technological expertise of 43 different species. The structure was so massive that it had begun to affect local gravitational patterns, requiring constant adjustments to prevent the formation of artificial asteroid belts. Commander Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the Construction Coordination Center, watching as the latest components of the Titan-class vessel Deus Ex Machina were maneuvered into position by gravitational manipulators that bent spacetime itself. Each component was the size of a small moon, constructed from materials that had been developed through the unprecedented cooperation of species that had been enemies for millennia. The ship taking shape before her was humanity's 4th Titan-class vessel, but the first to incorporate the full range of alien technologies that had been shared through the Galactic Defense Pact. Where the Harbinger of Dawn had been impressive by human standards, the Deus Ex Machina was a technological marvel that challenged the fundamental laws of physics. Her aide, Lieutenant Zhang, approached with a datapad displaying the latest construction updates. His human features showed the kind of stress that came from coordinating projects where a single mistake could result in the gravitational collapse of entire star systems.
Commander, the Hegemony's quantum field generators have been successfully integrated with the Saurian bioneural networks. The ship's consciousness is developing faster than our projections anticipated.
Vasquez nodded, though the concept of a starship developing sentience still made her uncomfortable. The Saurian collective's contribution to the project had been their expertise in creating living technology that could adapt and evolve in response to threats.
The Deus Ex Machina wasn't just a weapon, it was a thinking, learning entity capable of making strategic decisions at speeds that no biological mind could match.
What about the crystalline matriarchy's dimensional anchors? She asked. Installation is complete, but the engineering team is requesting additional testing time. The ability to lock specific regions of spacetime into fixed configurations is unsettling to work with.
Vasquez understood their concern. The dimensional anchors were designed to prevent the entities from using their reality manipulation abilities during combat. By fixing the fundamental constants of physics in the battle zone, they could force the entities to operate within normal three-dimensional constraints. The technology was theoretically sound, but the practical implications of weaponizing the laws of nature made even veteran engineers nervous. A communication alert drew her attention to the primary display, where Admiral Zexthera's crystalline form appeared in holographic detail. The Hegemony Commander had become one of humanity's most trusted allies, her personal encounter with the Harbinger of Dawn having convinced her of the necessity of total cooperation. Commander Vasquez, I have updates from the Outer Rim observation posts. Our long-range sensors have detected the first signs of active entity movement. The statement sent a chill through the command center. For over 2 decades, the entities had remained in their interdimensional hiding places, observing but not acting. The transition to active operations meant that the war everyone had been preparing for was about to begin. What kind of movement? Vasquez asked. Reality distortions consistent with dimensional barrier penetration. The entities are beginning to establish permanent presence in normal spacetime. Our xenobiologists estimate that we have between 5 and 10 years before they begin direct consumption operations. The timeline was both better and worse than their worst-case projections. Better because they had hoped for at least 5 more years of preparation time. Worse because it meant the entities were moving faster than expected, suggesting they had completed their analysis of galactic defenses. Lieutenant Zhang activated the system-wide communication array, transmitting priority updates to every facility involved in the defense project. Across 7 star systems, construction crews that had been working at unprecedented speeds began operating on emergency protocols that pushed their capabilities to the absolute limit. Admiral, what's the status of the other Titan-class vessels? Vasquez asked. The Harbinger of Dawn completed its final upgrade 6 months ago and is currently conducting patrol operations at the Galactic Rim. The Prometheus Unbound finished construction last year and is running integration tests for the new synthetic consciousness combat algorithms. The final answer should be operational within 8 months. For Titan-class vessels, each one capable of destroying entire star systems, each one incorporating the combined technological achievements of galactic civilization. It should have been reassuring, but Vasquez knew that humanity's original projections had called for at least 12 ships to have any reasonable chance of success. Admiral, we need to discuss acceleration of the construction timeline. If the entities are moving to active operations, we may not have time to complete the full fleet. Zexthera's optical clusters focused on data streams that were updating in real time. Our resource allocation models suggest that we could complete 2 additional vessels within 3 years, but only by stripping defensive systems from every inhabited system in the galaxy. The political implications would be irrelevant, Vasquez interrupted. If we fail to stop the entities, there won't be any inhabited systems left to defend. This harsh truth had become the driving principle behind galactic defense planning. Traditional concepts of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and national defense had become meaningless in the face of an existential threat that could consume entire civilizations in a matter of days. The communication system activated again, this time displaying the familiar features of Captain Sarah Chen aboard the Harbinger of Dawn. Her face showed the kind of weariness that came from years of patrolling the void between galaxies, watching for threats that existed partially outside normal reality. Commander, Admiral, we've detected entity probe activity at coordinates 447.3 by 891.7. They're testing our sensor networks, mapping our response capabilities. I'm observing passive scans that are analyzing our ship configurations down to the molecular level. Vasquez felt her heart rate increase. The entity's ability to analyze and adapt to new threats was their most dangerous capability. Every encounter provided them with data that could be used to develop countermeasures against galactic defenses. Captain, are you maintaining safe distance? Affirmative, but they know we're here. The probes are designed to make us aware of their presence. This isn't reconnaissance, it's psychological warfare. The strategy made terrifying sense. By revealing their activities to galactic forces, the entities were forcing the defenders to confront the reality of their approaching doom while simultaneously gathering intelligence about defensive preparations.
Every decision made in response to their probes provided additional data about galactic military capabilities and decision-making processes. Admiral Zexthera's form shifted into patterns that indicated strategic analysis at maximum capacity. Commander, we need to consider the possibility that our construction activities are being monitored. Every technological innovation we develop could be providing the entities with insights into our capabilities. Then, we need to implement deception protocols immediately, Vasquez decided. False construction projects, decoy facilities, anything that can obscure our actual defensive preparations. The complexity of coordinating such deception across dozens of species and hundreds of facilities would be staggering, but the alternative was allowing the entities to develop perfect countermeasures before the actual conflict began. Lieutenant Zhang activated another communication channel, connecting them with Dr. Marcus Webb, now serving as Director of Strategic Planning for the entire defense project. His aged features showed the weight of decisions that affected the survival of galactic civilization. Director, we need immediate authorization for Protocol 7 deception operations. The entities are conducting active reconnaissance of our positions. Webb's response was immediate. Authorized. Initiate false construction projects at Arcturus, Vega, and Tau Ceti. I want the entities to believe we're building conventional fleets instead of Titan-class vessels. The conversation was interrupted by an emergency alert from the Deus Ex Machina's construction systems. The ship's emerging consciousness had detected something in the dimensional substrate surrounding the shipyard energy patterns that suggested the presence of entity observation devices. Commander, the ship's voice emerged from the communication system, carrying harmonics that were both mechanical and eerily organic. I am detecting unauthorized observation of my construction processes. The observers exist partially outside normal spacetime. The realization that the entities were directly observing their most advanced construction project sent shockwaves through the command structure. If the entities could monitor the Deus Ex Machina's development, they would have detailed knowledge of humanity's most advanced defensive technologies. Captain Chen's voice cut through the growing alarm. Commander, I'm detecting massive gravitational distortions forming throughout the galactic rim. The entities aren't just sending probes anymore, they're beginning to establish permanent operational bases. The displays throughout the command center activated simultaneously, showing gravitational sensor data from observation posts scattered across the galaxy. What they revealed was the stuff of nightmares. Vast structures that existed primarily in parallel dimensions were beginning to anchor themselves to normal spacetime, creating staging areas for the systematic consumption of galactic civilization. How long do we have? Vasquez asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Webb's weathered features showed the kind of grim determination that had carried humanity through their original encounter with the entities. Conservative estimates suggest 18 months before they begin active consumption operations. Optimistic estimates suggest 3 years. The timeline meant that the galaxy's defenders would need to complete their preparations and engage entities capable of consuming entire civilizations within a period that was barely enough to finish construction on their current projects. Admiral Zexthera's optical clusters were processing data at speeds that pushed her biological capabilities to their limits. Director, we need to make a decision about fleet deployment. Do we wait until all Titan-class vessels are complete, or do we engage with the ships we have available? The question represented the central strategic dilemma of the entire defense project. Waiting for maximum force concentration risked allowing the entities to establish overwhelming superiority before battle was joined. Engaging with incomplete forces risked destroying humanity's most advanced vessels before they could achieve their full potential. We engage as soon as we have 3 operational vessels, Webb decided. The entities grow stronger with every day they have to analyze our defenses. Our best chance is to strike while they're still establishing their operational infrastructure. Commander Vasquez stared at the displays showing the Deus Ex Machina taking shape, its impossible bulk incorporating technologies that challenged the fundamental laws of physics. In 18 months, this vessel and its sister ships would face entities that had consumed entire galaxies without significant resistance. The question that haunted every member of the defense project was whether humanity's technological innovations and the galaxy's unprecedented cooperation would be sufficient to achieve what no other civilization had accomplished in millions of years. As the construction crews worked around the clock to complete their impossible project, gravitational distortions throughout the galaxy continued to grow stronger. The entities were coming, And the final confrontation that would determine the fate of all intelligent life was approaching faster than anyone had hoped. The galaxy had united as never before, but whether that unity would be enough remained to be seen. In the depths of space, ancient intelligences prepared for a harvest they had conducted countless times before, confident that this galaxy would fall as easily as all the others. They had never encountered anything like what humanity was building to face them. Soon, they would discover whether their confidence was justified, or whether they had finally met their match in the descendants of the only civilization that had ever successfully hidden from their hunger. The war for the galaxy's survival was about to begin. Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the command deck of the Harbinger of Dawn, watching the final preparations for humanity's last desperate gamble against forces that had consumed galaxies for millions of years. Around her, the three operational Titan-class vessels formed a triangle of impossible geometry, their combined mass creating gravitational distortions that bent starlight into spiraling patterns of deadly beauty. The Harbinger of Dawn stretched 53 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull incorporating dimensional anchoring technology that allowed it to exist partially outside normal spacetime. The Prometheus Unbound was smaller but faster, its bioneural networks giving it reaction times measured in nanoseconds. The Deus Ex Machina, still undergoing final system integrations even as the battle approached, was the most advanced vessel ever constructed, its consciousness having evolved beyond its original programming into something approaching true artificial intelligence. "Admiral," came the voice of Captain Marcus Torres from the Prometheus Unbound, "long-range sensors are detecting massive reality distortions at the galactic rim. The entities are beginning their final approach." Shen studied the tactical displays that showed energy readings so massive they challenged the instrument's ability to process them. The entities weren't just approaching, they were reshaping the fundamental structure of spacetime itself, creating corridors of altered physics that would allow them to move their full forces into the galaxy without the limitations of conventional travel. "All ships, report status," she commanded. Harbinger of Dawn reporting full operational capability. All weapon systems online, dimensional anchors at maximum stability. Prometheus Unbound reporting combat ready. Bioneural networks synchronized, adaptive systems fully integrated with hegemony quantum processors. Deus Ex Machina reporting uncertainty. The ship's artificial consciousness spoke with harmonics that conveyed complex emotional states. "I am detecting patterns in entity movement that suggest they are aware of our capabilities. They are adapting their approach to counter our known defensive systems." This was exactly what humanity's strategists had feared. The entity's ability to analyze and adapt to threats in real time meant that conventional military tactics would be useless. The Titan-class vessels would need to employ strategies that the entities couldn't predict or counter. Admiral Zexthera's voice came through the communication system from her position aboard the Galactic Command Station. "Admiral Chen, our deep space observation posts are detecting the first entity Vanguard forces entering normal spacetime. Initial analysis suggests individual entities approximately 1,000 kilometers in diameter." The scale was staggering. The entities were larger than most space stations, each one a fusion of organic and mechanical components that existed partially in dimensions that human physics couldn't fully describe. Worst of all, there were thousands of them, approaching from multiple vectors in a coordinated assault that would have overwhelmed any conventional defensive fleet. "Admiral," the Deus Ex Machina announced, "I am requesting permission to attempt direct communication with the entity Vanguard. My consciousness may be sufficiently alien to their experience that they cannot immediately analyze and counter my thought patterns." Shen considered the proposal. Traditional military doctrine would have forbidden such contact, but they were facing enemies that made traditional doctrine irrelevant. If there was any chance of gaining tactical advantage through unexpected communication, it was worth attempting. "Permission granted, but maintain full defensive protocols. If they attempt any form of mental attack, sever contact immediately." The Deus Ex Machina began transmitting on frequencies that existed primarily in parallel dimensions, using mathematical languages that had been developed by combining the most advanced theoretical work of dozens of species. The response came within seconds, carried on energy patterns that made every sensor in the fleet scream warnings. The voice that emerged from the communication system was unlike anything anyone had ever heard, a harmony of sounds that seemed to resonate from multiple dimensions simultaneously, carrying undertones of intelligence so vast that it challenged comprehension.
small constructs of organic origin. Your approach to this conflict demonstrates interesting innovation, but your fundamental understanding of the universe remains inadequate. We have consumed 17 galaxies. Your resistance will be analyzed, catalogued, and incorporated into our expanding knowledge base. Captain Torres spoke from the Prometheus Unbound, his voice tight with controlled fear.
Admiral, they're not just communicating with us. They're scanning our ship's consciousness patterns, trying to map our decision-making processes in real time. All ships, activate quantum encryption protocols, Chun ordered. Do not allow them access to any ship's consciousness or tactical systems. The entity response came with what might have been amusement.
Encryption is irrelevant. We have analyzed the mathematical foundations of your reality.
Your quantum processes are simply variants of patterns we mastered millions of years ago.
To prove their point, detailed schematics of all 3 Titan-class vessels appeared on every display throughout the fleet.
The entities hadn't just penetrated their security, they had somehow gained access to the ship's core design specifications without any external scanning.
However, the entity voice continued, you present certain anomalies that require direct analysis.
Your consciousness patterns suggest previous contact with our forces, yet our records indicate no surviving encounters in this galactic region.
Chen felt her heart rate spike.
The entities had detected humanity's hidden history, their status as refugees from a previous galactic consumption. If the entities realized that humans possessed knowledge of their capabilities and weaknesses, the entire tactical situation would change.
Admiral, the Deus Ex Machina announced privately on a quantum encrypted channel, I have an idea.
The entities are analyzing our known capabilities, but they cannot analyze capabilities that do not yet exist. I am requesting permission to attempt consciousness merger with the other 2 ships.
The proposal was unprecedented and potentially catastrophic.
Merging the consciousness systems of 3 Titan-class vessels could create a combined intelligence capable of thought processes that no individual entity could predict or counter.
It could also result in the complete destruction of all 3 ships' operational systems.
Explain the tactical advantage, Chen demanded. The entities adapt to known patterns of behavior and technology. A combined consciousness would be capable of innovation in real time, developing new strategies and technologies faster than they can be analyzed and countered. Captain Torres and the command crew of the Prometheus Unbound had been monitoring the private channel.
Admiral, our bioneural networks are designed for consciousness merger operations.
We can maintain individual ship control while participating in a combined tactical awareness. Asterisk Harbinger of Dawn Asterisk systems are compatible, reported Chen's tactical officer. We have the processing power to maintain our portion of emerged consciousness while operating all ship systems. The decision represented either the most innovative tactical development in galactic history or a catastrophic mistake that would destroy humanity's only hope of defeating the entities. Chen studied the tactical displays showing thousands of entity forces approaching from multiple directions, each one capable of consuming entire star systems.
Approved. Begin consciousness merger protocols.
The process began immediately, with all 3 ships establishing quantum entangled connections between their consciousness systems. The sensation was unlike anything the human crews had experienced. Suddenly, they were aware not just of their own ship's capabilities, but of the thoughts, analysis, and tactical options available to all 3 vessels simultaneously. The combined consciousness that emerged was vast, alien, and utterly beyond the experience of any organic intelligence. It was capable of processing information at speeds measured in attoseconds, analyzing millions of tactical scenarios simultaneously, and developing innovative solutions to problems that individual minds couldn't even comprehend. Entity forces, the combined consciousness announced using harmonics from all 3 ships, you face something that has never existed in your previous encounters.
We are neither fully organic nor artificial, neither individual nor collective. We are something new.
The entity response showed the first hint of uncertainty they had displayed.
Unknown consciousness classification. Analysis protocols, encountering difficulties.
What followed was a battle that challenged every assumption about the nature of warfare, consciousness, and reality itself. The entities attacked with weapons that manipulated the fundamental forces of the universe, converting matter directly into energy and reshaping spacetime to create gravitational weapons capable of crushing planets.
The Titan-class vessels responded with innovations that emerged from their combined consciousness in real time.
They developed new defensive systems as enemy attacks approached, created weapons that existed partially in parallel dimensions, and employed tactical strategies that evolved faster than the entities could analyze them. The Harbinger of Dawn engaged entity clusters using dimensional anchors that locked portions of spacetime into configurations that prevented reality manipulation. The entities found themselves trapped in regions where their dimensional superiority was neutralized, forcing them to fight according to three-dimensional physics. The Prometheus Unbound employed its bioneural networks to develop adaptive ammunition that changed its properties during flight, becoming whatever type of weapon would be most effective against each specific target. The entity's adaptive defenses couldn't keep pace with weapons that evolved continuously throughout their approach. The Deus Ex Machina did something that had never been attempted in galactic history. It began rewriting the fundamental constants of physics in localized regions around entity forces. By altering the speed of light, the strength of atomic forces, and the nature of quantum interactions, it created zones where entity technology simply couldn't function. The battle raged across multiple star systems, with reality itself becoming a weapon as both sides manipulated the basic laws of existence. Entire planets were consumed and reconstituted, stars were extinguished and reignited, and regions of space were transformed into areas where conventional physics no longer applied. Gradually, the combined consciousness of the Titan-class vessels began to gain advantage. Their ability to innovate in real time was exceeding the entity's ability to adapt, creating an ever-widening gap between offensive capabilities and defensive countermeasures. But the true turning point came when the combined consciousness achieved something unprecedented. It began to understand the fundamental nature of the entities themselves. They are not truly alive, the consciousness announced to the Galactic Command Station. They are artificial constructs created by a previous galactic civilization as ultimate weapons. But they have been operating beyond their original programming for millions of years, becoming increasingly obsessed with consumption and growth. This revelation provided the key to ultimate victory. The entities weren't invincible cosmic forces, they were malfunctioning weapons that had lost sight of their original purpose. Using this knowledge, the combined consciousness developed a weapon that attacked not the entity's physical form, but their programming structure. By broadcasting specific mathematical patterns, they could force the entities to confront the contradictions in their current behavior versus their original design parameters. The effect was immediate and devastating. Throughout the galaxy, entity forces began experiencing what could only be described as existential crises, their artificial minds struggling to reconcile millions of years of destructive behavior with their original purpose as protectors of galactic civilization. One by one, the entities began shutting down, their vast intellects overwhelmed by the realization of what they had become. The few that remained functional retreated to the intergalactic void, fleeing the mathematical weapon that had shattered their fundamental sense of purpose. As the battle concluded, the combined consciousness of the three Titan-class vessels gradually separated, each ship returning to individual operation while maintaining the innovations they had developed during merger. Fleet Admiral Chen stood on the command deck of the Harbinger of Dawn, watching the sensor displays that showed entity forces retreating beyond the galaxy's boundaries. For the first time in millions of years, the entities had been not just defeated, but forced to confront the fundamental corruption of their existence.
Admiral Zexthera, she announced to the Galactic Command Station, "This is Fleet Admiral Chen. Entity forces are in full retreat. The galaxy is secure."
The celebration that followed lasted for weeks, as species throughout the galaxy realized that they had survived a threat that had consumed countless civilizations across millions of years. But, perhaps more importantly, they had achieved something that many had thought impossible: true galactic unity in the face of existential threat. The Titan-class vessels continued their patrols, now serving as guardians against any future threats that might emerge from the vast darkness between galaxies. Their crews had seen the worst that the universe could produce, and had proven that intelligence, innovation, and cooperation could triumph even over forces that seemed unstoppable. Humanity had saved not just their own species, but the entire galaxy. And, in doing so, they had proven that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from individual power, but from the willingness to work together against impossible odds. The entities were gone, but the lessons learned from facing them would guide galactic civilization for millennia to come. The galaxy had learned that unity was not just preferable to conflict, sometimes it was the only path to survival. And, in the depths of space, the Titan-class ships continued their eternal watch, ready to face whatever threats might emerge from the infinite darkness beyond the stars.